زلزله تهران.
خدا نکنه تو تهران زلزله اتفاق بیفته. ما هر روز با زلزله‌های کوچکی تو تهران روبرو هستیم. چرا بحران وجود داره؟
آلودگی هوا می‌دونید که مسئله بسیار مهم و بزرگی است.
تهران امروز با مسائل و مشکلات بسیاری روبروست که برخی از آنها در ابعاد ملی مطرح هستند.
امروز با یه جمعیت بالای 13 میلیون نفر در تهران مواجه هستیم.
شهر تهران با سختی بسیار زیادی روبروست.
در این مستند به مسئله پایتخت، ضعف‌ها و قوت‌هایش پرداخته شده است تا پاسخ روشنی بر این پرسش باشد که آیا انتقال پایتخت گرهی از مسائل و مشکلات تهران و ساکنانش و یا حتی کشور باز خواهد کرد یا خیر؟
I like it. It's a very interesting place.
It's a very noisy city, and foreigners like me can easily get killed on the roads.
We should have a new capital. So it was shifted to Islamabad.
The capital now is so distant from the rest of the country, makes it more corrupt.
So it was King George V who decided to shift the capital from Kolkata to Delhi.
آلمان از جمله کشورهایی است که چندین پایتخت دارد. از همین رو ایران میتواند تجربه این کشور را مطالعه و به آن توجه کند. کشور آلمان در سال 1991 اقدام به انتقال پایتخت خود از شهر بن به برلین کرد. پیوستن نواحی جمهوری دموکرات آلمان به جمهوری فدرال آلمان و اتحاد رسمی دو آلمان شرقی و غربی بر سلسله مراتب شهری این کشور تأثیر بسزایی گذاشت.
I was in Germany at the time when after the unification the decision was taken to transfer the capital back to Berlin where it had been before the war. It had after the war been shifted to Bonn close to Cologne. And the decision was taken after the war, after the unification, to bring it back to Berlin. There was quite a lengthy discussion in Germany about this. There was a political discussion in Parliament about whether the capital should be transferred to Berlin, and there was also a public debate in the papers because this was obviously something which was of importance to the whole of Germany. The region of Bonn certainly tried to make sure that they would not suffer from losing their capital status. And in the end, it was decided by a very narrow margin in Parliament that there should indeed be a transfer to Berlin.
برلین بار دیگر با هدف توسعه و توازن اقتصادی اجتماعی پایتخت سیاسی آلمان شد. در حالی که بسیاری از کارکردهای پایتختی در بن باقی ماند. چگونگی برنامه‌ریزی شهری و معماری برای دولت جدید، نحوه تلفیق و هماهنگسازی حیات قبلی شهر برلین با نقش جدید آن و چالش سیاست اقتصادی کنونی آلمان برای بازگرداندن برلین به وضعیت پیش از جنگ به عنوان شهر اقتصادی جهان از چالش‌های پیش روی برلین مطرح شده است.
For one, there had been a movement after the unification to return to the old status before the war, at least structurally. The argument at the time was that the capital should be more in the middle of the country.
در مجموع میتوان گفت با وجود اینکه نمونه آلمان در جابجایی پایتخت از معدود موارد جابجایی‌های آگاهانه در کشورهای صنعتی و پیشرفته است، دولت آلمان در فرایند انتقال پایتخت از بن به برلین متحمل هزینه‌های زیادی شده است و پس از گذشت 25 سال و با وجود اقتصاد قدرتمند و برنامه‌ریزی‌های دقیق، دولت هنوز هم درگیر جابجایی پایتخت از بن به برلین است. در حالی که برلین با همه جذابیت‌های شهری و تاریخیش هنوز نتوانسته در جذب سرمایه‌گذاری‌های داخلی مطابق پیشبینی‌ها عمل کند. همچنان بن به عنوان مغز متفکر سیاسی آلمان عمل می‌نماید و به رغم ساختار فدرال و غیر متمرکز دولت آلمان، هزینه و چالش‌های جانبی بر اقتصاد و سیاست کشور وارد کرده است.
Because obviously you have to rebuild structures in one city and you destroy them in another. Also, big companies have a tendency to go where the capital is. So they had to move as well, and it was expensive on the companies as well. But overall, my impression was that the general feeling was, okay, it's expensive, but given the historic situation of the unification, it was the right thing to do. I know that in trying to compensate the city of Bonn for losing its status, and not only its status, but also the thousands of people working in government offices which would then be transferred to Berlin, and in brackets, still slightly less than 50% of all government officials live and work in Bonn.
استرالیا از دیگر کشورهایی است که در سال 1927 پایتخت خود را از ملبورن به کانبرا انتقال داد. ایده برنامه‌ریزی و ساخت کانبرا در پاسخ به نیاز اداری و سیاسی، یعنی نیاز به مرکز هماهنگ کننده امور ایالات و ادارات سیاسی، دفاعی و خارجی استرالیا مطرح شده است. مراحل ساخت کانبرا تا تبدیل آن به شهری کاملا توسعه یافته تقریباً کل قرن 20 را طول کشیده است. در حقیقت پس از همپیمان شدن ایالات مختلف استرالیا و پذیرش سیستم فدرالی در سال 1901، چانه‌زنی و مناظره‌های سیاسی بر سر انتخاب مکان و نحوه توسعه پایتخت جدید آغاز شد و در نهایت با انتخاب کانبرا در سال 1908 به نتیجه رسید.
There was a lot of reasons that they had to argue about. There was the military, and in terms of defense, where would be safest to put the capital cities, because at the time naval warfare was quite common, and so Melbourne and Sydney, this was one of the parts that they looked for another capital city spot, was because Melbourne is quite accessible by water, because they have the bay, and then same with Sydney, they're very accessible by water, and I'm sure some people would have heard of the Sydney Harbour Bridge, which is one of the biggest icons in Australia, and it comes right in the bay, and you can just go straight into Sydney. So
the main problem was that there were two big cities in Australia, Sydney and Melbourne, and for a long time there was a battle between the two, which one was the capital of Australia. So the whole of the country decided that it was a good idea instead to get rid of that and make a new city.
حضور مردم استرالیا از اوائل طرح و اجرای برنامه‌ها از ویژگی خاص این تجربه است. این ویژگی کمک زیادی به تسهیل چشمانداز تحقق پایتخت هم به عنوان شهر پیش‌بینی شده و هم به عنوان شهر در حال شکل‌گیری کرده است.
There are some difficulties because Canberra is still a small city and it's not the same as the other the provincial capitals or state capital cities, but they do a good job with administration, so the head of the military is there, the head of government is there.
I think it was quite a good idea. I mean, because otherwise there is always still a little bit of tension between Melbourne and Sydney, because I'm from Melbourne and I'm like, oh, the Sydney people, I'm not too sure about them, but they have the same thing back, and to have one of them not considered better than the other is quite a good idea.
I think it has worked well, but they still have issues with people coming to visit and people living there that don't want to work in with the government. So there are not many opportunities if you don't want to work with the government.
It's literally just the capital. It's nothing more, nothing less. But it's slowly growing.
Because it's a small population, there are maybe 300,000, 400,000, but they all work for the government. And in Australia, there is maybe, we look poorly upon people who work for the government because it's taxpayer money. So I think that's the main issue.
از جالبترین بررسی‌های انجام شده در این زمینه تصور و برداشت استرالیایی‌ها از پایتخت ملی است. در این بررسی به این نتیجه رسیدند که زمان طولانی باعث ایجاد شکاف نسلی میان شهروندان شده است. به این معنا که نسل مسن‌تر نگاه منفی به این پروژه داشته و شکلگیری کانبرا را متأثر از مسائل سیاسی و به ضرر منافع ملی می‌داند. اما نسل جوانتر بر این باورند که پایتخت جدید تصویر خوبی از کشورشان در رسانه‌های جهانی ارائه می‌دهد و شکلگیریش صرفاً متأثر از مسائل سیاسی نیست. این تفاوت دیدگاه از اینجا ناشی می‌شود که نسل مسن سالهای زیادی از زندگیش را در فرایند کند اولیه ساخت و ساز پایتخت جدید سپری کرده است، اما نسل جدید رشد و توسعه مراحل پایانی تحقق طرح را دیده است.
I'm really not too sure. I think maybe the younger people, they think that moving politics out of the big cities is better, because if the main politics goes to Canberra, then there's less intervention in local big city politics. But the system, I'm not too sure why older people don't like it as much. I think maybe because in their head they always think it should be in Melbourne or it should be in Sydney. At least my parents, they didn't mind. Mind you, my mum grew up in Canberra. She was born there. But to be honest, I think a lot of Australia, they don't really mind. There's no real argument or issue about it. It's just that's our capital. No one really cares. Everyone kind of goes to the other cities anyway.
اما سرعت انتقال پایتخت آنقدر کم بود که تا سال 1955 فقط مجلس و چند ساختمان دیگر دولتی به کانبرا منتقل شده بود و میزان پیشرفت پروژه آنقدر کم بود که تقریباً به حساب نمی آمد. مهمترین دلیل سرعت پایین پیشرفت پروژه در تجربه استرالیا تحلیل اراده سیاسی پشتیبان این جابجایی در خلال بحث‌ها و رایزنی‌های طولانی برای تعیین محل استقرار دولت در کانبرا بود. با وجود مخالفین سرسخت و موافقین بسیار، استرالیا بالاخره توانست پس از گذشت حدود 1 قرن پایتخت خود را به کانبرا منتقل کند. بیش از 4 دهه می‌گذرد که در ایران سخن از انتقال پایتخت است. این طرح که تا به حال تنها در حد تئوری باقی مانده، به نظر می‌رسد مخالفین جدی و حتی موافقین جدی ندارد.
Very slow because it took them a long time to decide where they wanted to have the city. So that was the big decision. They knew it had to be in between Melbourne and Sydney because that's where the business is and that's where the politicians are as well. But it was difficult for them to decide where they were going to put it. One of the big cities that they talked about for a long time was on the coast. And then they decided that we couldn't have it on the coast because it would be too easy for a naval attack. So they decided to have it inland, and then they were wondering, well, where do we put it? We need space, we need a water, like we need a river to run through. There needs to be enough area for it to grow outwards. And at the end of the day, they wanted to make a city that is like Australia. So it's in the bush, it's in the countryside. And I think that's really why it took so long, because they were trying to find the perfect location.
I think there's just a lot to organise when you're picking a capital or moving, because you're moving a lot of organisational stuff, a lot of government agencies and services, and you've got to bring them all to one place. And I think that's kind of difficult to organise, because there's so much stuff to kind of think about and plan, and especially when you're starting a new sort of city. You have to lay it out perfectly, and you want to set it up so it grows, so there's people want to go there, and that means you have to set up infrastructure, public services, got to do the entertainment, you've got to have what will draw the public in, like, the galleries, museums, like restaurants, cafes, that sort of thing.
توجه به عوامل مرتبط با نسل‌ها و گروه‌های سنی و اجتماعی در فرایند برنامه‌ریزی تا تحقق کامل طرح از مهمترین درس‌های تجربه استرالیا در جابجایی پایتخت است.
So my name is Diara, and I'm originally from Kazakhstan. We transferred our capital from Almaty to Akmola. At that time it was Akmola. So it was on the 10th of December 1997. So it was actually the third in the history of Kazakhstan, but it was the first and only in the move from one capital to another in the post-Soviet country since we got our independence in 1990. So I think it was really unique, decision. And in the beginning, it took, we moved from Almaty to Akmola, and then in 1998 they changed the name to Astana, which means capital. Our president was really, supportive about this idea, because he was thinking about this quite a lot, related to geographical reasons, related to ethno-demographical reasons. So at the end, everyone, of course, was shocked, because it was really out of the box decision. It was something that we never did. And then, he actually made the first official one is geographical reason, because you know that the Almaty located in the very south part of Kazakhstan, because the Kazakhstan is very quite huge country, and it's like largest country in the world. So it was kind of hard to get there, and it was kind of in the border. Also, Almaty was not that sustainable, let's say, because we have also mountains as Tehran, and it's kind of dangerous because sometimes we have earthquakes. Another reason is also that Almaty was already very packed with a lot of people, with a lot of migrants. In that case, there is no capacity to actually to expand the city. And also Almaty is quite polluted city. And when it comes to geographical reasons, Astana, our current capital, is kind of in the middle of Kazakhstan, and it's very quite sustainable. We don't have earthquake there. So there is a lot of huge possibility to grow, to expand the city. President for sure should have a lot of courage in order to make it. I think it was really difficult, but at the same time, as we can see, the result, the outcome is very good. Right now, I think Tehran is in the stage that is very packed, as Almaty was, and I don't know. I think the government should have to think a lot and have to have a plan, as our, for example, government did. They planned a lot, and then it wasn't something something happened in 1 or 2 months. They had a lot of time to do so, to prepare themselves, because it's not only about just movement of the city, but the whole government, all the prime ministers have to leave their home family, their city, their houses, and move with their family to another city. And that city, they didn't have any idea how it's going to happen. But they made the risk, and at the end, it turned out very good decisions. So I hope if you're going to make this decision, it's going to be a very conscious one, and the government will think a lot, and then at the end everyone will be happy with the new capital if it's going to happen. I don't know.
سر و کله نیاز به انتقال پایتخت ممکن است در هر کشوری پیدا شود، اما نیاز هر کشوری حتماً اولویت‌هایی دارد که در دسته‌بندی کلی ممکن است با کشورهای دیگر مشابهت‌هایی داشته باشد و این شباهت‌ها نباید موجب کپی برداری کشورها از تجربیات یکدیگر شوند. هر اقلیمی با توجه به نیازها و اولویت‌های خود باید به یک روش بومی دست پیدا کند تا با حداقل هزینه‌ها بیشترین بازدهی را در جهت تحقق هدف خود داشته باشد. تهران نیز با تمام مزیت‌ها، محدودیت‌هایش از این قاعده مستثنا نیست. با مطالعه و بررسی تاریخ تهران از زمان پایتخت شدن تا به امروز می‌توان از نیازها و اولویت‌های این شهر و محدودیت‌ها و قوت‌هایش باخبر شد تا تصمیم‌های بهتری برای پایتخت گرفته شود.
شواهد باستانشناسی این رو دارن الان میگن در 2 نقطه از پهنه‌ای که امروز شهر تهران برش استقرار پیدا کرده آثار زیست انسان و جوامع انسانی وجود داره
و ری در جای قرار گرفته که جاده‌ای که به سمت هندوستان میره به این دالان متصل میشه و تهران میشه گفت فرزند خلف ری هست.
یعنی همه اقوام ایرانی، یعنی الان شما ایران رو در این وسعت امروزیش در نظر بگیر، همه در تهران نمایندگی داشتن، بعدم شاخص بود، یعنی محله محله بودن.
تغییر واقعی تهران جدید رو باید از دوره رضا شاه دنبال کنیم.
دوره پهلوی به دلیل همون نگاه نظامی که داشت که همه چی رو از موضع قدرت و اینها وارد کنه، آمد مثلا یه سیستم خیابان کشی هایی رو وارد کرد.
یه چیز جالبی که تو روزنامه ها زیاد میخونی شما، میبینی تهران گرامافون میاد و وقتی گرامافون میاد و خب خیلی هم افتخار میکنن که حالا دیگه قهوه خانه ها شدن کافه و همه این کافه ها گرامافون دارن و مثلا مردم که تو خیابان رد میشن صدای موزیک اذیتشون میکنه.